Hello everyone, my name is Matúš Jevčák and I'm happy to be a director of Adav Institute, a security and defense policy think tank from Bratislava, Slovakia. Here we are today to discuss a new part of our discussions, Adav Euro-Atlantic, our long-term series on changing nature of international politics around Europe and the globe. Today, I have a tremendous opportunity to chance a very important topic of upcoming elections in Turkey and its pivotal meaning for upcoming years in the case of different scenarios we will discuss today with my guests, which are able to come after from these elections. I'm happy to speak with Dr. Ozan Örmeci, Associate Professor at Istanbul Kent University at Istanbul. Dr. Örmeci is a political scientist and expert on Turkish political history and foreign affairs. My co-speaker is Matúš Jevčák, our editor-in-chief in Adav Institute and senior analyst focusing on Turkey. Gentlemen, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Matúš.
Thank you.
As indicated, today we are discussing post-election scenarios for Turkey domestic, but mostly foreign policy, and what changes we can expect from the elections. The elections are coming in 2 weeks on May 13, and we are speaking both presidential and parliamentary elections. Dr. Örmeci, please introduce us to current situation and why are these upcoming elections so important?
Thank you. Thank you for the Adapt Institute as well for organizing such an important event for Turkish political scientists and social scientists. Interest shown to us, to our politics from Europe is always interesting and a good thing for us. I was in Poland with the Erasmus Plus Mobility program 2 weeks ago, and there were questions coming from our Polish colleagues and students as well. So it's great to see that although Turkish bid for EU accession doesn't progress too rapidly, there is still on both sides, kind of optimism and interest towards each other. That's a great thing for Turkish political scientists. The elections will be really important for Turkey, Turkish people. Turkey, and now we use it instead of Turkey. The state made this decision because it's the 100th year. First of all, it's the 100th year anniversary of the foundation of the Republic of Turkey. Atatürk and his friends established Turkey a century ago following the Turkish victory in the independence war. And we have two different camps, two different political blocks, People's Alliance, the government bloc, and the Nation Alliance, the opposition bloc, which have very different agendas for the future of Turkey. On the one hand, President Erdogan, who has been the ruler of Turkey since in the last 20 years, 2 decades, proposes a kind of presidential system. Some call it sultanism or hyper-presidentialism due to the excessive powers concentrated in the hands of the presidency, post of presidency. Plus, Erdogan leans on more Turkey's military capabilities, Turkey's transformation into a regional power, which have a solid base, solid support in Turkey, by the way, on such matters. Plus, maybe less freedoms in terms of media and academia. On the other hand, we have the opposition bloc, now supported formally. It was only CHP, the pro-secular left-leaning party, but now they have support coming from 5 other right-wing parties. 2 of them, in fact, emerged from AK Party very recently in the last few years, Ali Babacan's DEVA and Ahmet Davutoğlu's Future Party. They don't have real, according to opinion polls, real presence in terms of voting shares, but the trend is in favor of the opposition. And this bloc proposes a more democratic Turkey in the classical European or American sense, a parliamentary system, less powers for the presidency, a more strict separation of powers between executive and legislative, maybe in some ways, more autonomy for the judiciary, and of course more freedoms for criticism in academia and in the media. Two blocks has still solid support. They have like more than 40% maybe support, both blocks. That's why it will be a very tough election. Secondly, of course, although Western countries, the European Union or the United States, do not openly, admit their maybe criticism towards the government, or try to infiltrate, try to give an impression that they are infiltrating into the elections. I think they are more inclined to support the opposition due to Turkey's recent regression of democracy in the last few years following the failed military coup in 2016. Turkish democracy has lost real ground. So according to all democratic indexes, Turkey is now considered as a hybrid regime, not a real democracy anymore, or even an electoral autocracy. Of course, there are elements of democracy. We have seen in the 4 years ago, in the local elections in Istanbul, Ankara, and big cities, the opposition won almost all big municipalities. And we feel still the atmosphere of democracy because we have strong ties with Europe, United States. These are traditional size. We are not representing a former Soviet country. Turkey has always been on the block of democracy, a NATO country, a staunch NATO ally from the earlier years. But on the other hand, of course, there's this regression. And again, maybe it's not openly stated very frequently. Russia, we know that due to earlier agreements, plus Turkey's foreign policy options during the Ukrainian war, Russian invasion of Ukraine, due to President Erdogan's close ties with President Putin as two strong leaders, Russia probably opts for the government to win, whereas United States, we know that US President Mr. Joe Biden, during his electoral campaign, he openly stated that he's against Erdogan regime because it's not very democratic. When he was elected also, he didn't change his position. He didn't meet with Erdogan in terms of bilateral visit. They came once together as part of the NATO meeting. So it's obvious that US and Western countries have more sympathy for the opposition to win. And of course, another thing we might mention is that it's not taking place like a usual election. I mean, we are not talking about an ordinary election in a standardized democratic European Western country. Both camps, both blocks, they try to survive in politics. If the opposition fails, probably their leader will be changing. So Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, it's his maybe last chance to become president, the ruler of Turkey. On the other hand, if Erdogan loses, of course, it might be very difficult for the government after such long years in power to adapt to new conditions coming with the real political realities. There are fears or anxieties about there might be problems related to electoral security. These anxieties are caused by two main reasons. One, there was a huge earthquake in Turkey in early February. Almost 50,000 people, unfortunately, are dead. And millions of people had to change their cities. They had to migrate to other cities, other Turkish cities. Most of them, I think more than half of them, still did not change their residency. So either they won't be voting in the elections, or they have to go to the city where the earthquake, the bad memories taking place. They have to go to that city on that day. And it's very difficult, I think, because airports are not working anymore. So they have to go by car, which would be not be feasible for them. So many people won't be able to vote. That's the first problem about elections. That's why I thought there might be delayed elections, but the government didn't take this decision. Secondly, of course, some people who are harshly critical of the current government, they think there might be electoral fraud, but the government circles also say that the opposition also can use such methods. There are such fears. For these three main reasons, the elections are not ordinary elections. These are extremely important elections. And of course, there is the foreign policy aspect, which is your expertise and your focus of interest. In terms of foreign policy, I try to mention a little bit, but of course, Turkey, normally a classical Western ally. We know that Turkey is almost a founding member of Council of Europe, and an earlier member of NATO, an historical partner for Washington, especially in military security issues. Turkey was NATO's southern flank during the Cold War and a staunch NATO ally. There was considerable support for the position of Turkish armed forces. In politics, in Cold War, Turkish armed forces was the most important institution in Turkish politics. They somehow had the power to set up the game or even directly take the ruling power, as in the case of 1960 and 1980 military coups, or behind closed doors somehow give a direction to the Turkish politics, of course, within the same direction with Washington most of the time. But in recent years, during the EU harmonization process, which was in fact a good thing for Turkey, Turkey made its steps towards civilian democracy. And in fact, it was the current party who did this, current governing party, AK Party, during the time of Abdullah Gül, later earlier Erdogan years. They were the ones who legislated a lot of EU harmonization reform laws, and the main opposition party, CHP, CHP, also Republican People's Party, also supported these reforms. But of course, what was hoped was that the military inclining rule will be replaced by a more secular and democratic rule, and Turkey will be an EU member. This didn't materialize. Turkey became a more civilian country, but the weakening status of the Turkish armed forces couldn't be fulfilled, maybe, as in terms of the security for secular lifestyle, secularism in general, and preventing radical Islam to emerge, etc. This wasn't enough with the free media or civil society organizations. So we are still in the maybe experimentation process. It didn't probably it will lead to Turkey becoming a more civilian democratic state, as in the case of Europe, because our history dictates this. Starting from the late Ottoman era, Turkey has always been a pro-Western country in terms of its political reforms. Atatürk took almost all Turkey's earlier laws from European countries. Same for Ottomans. Most of our laws, legal documents came inspired from European documents. Plus, our trade still, almost half of Turkey's trade is with European countries, Germany, of course, being the first, and other countries ranked behind. Plus, we have Britain now out of EU, but as an important partner for Turkey, not only in Turkey, but also in Cyprus, plus United States. So West is quite strong in Turkey. But in recent years, of course, in terms of foreign policy, due to Turkey's increasing energy needs, Ankara developed strong ties with Russia. And unfortunately, after the failed coup attempt, which was perceived by the Turkish government as an Western effort to topple down his regime, Turkey's rapprochement with Russia increased. So Turkey imported S-400 air missile defense system from Moscow, plus Erdogan and Putin began to contact almost maybe 10 times a year. Reciprocal visits were materialized. Russia's influence over Turkish media and Turkish politics increased. And of course, when we are talking about Russia, it's not early Putin era or Yeltsin era. It's more anti-democratic Russia, trying to threaten European countries, challenge American and NATO expansion, which is maybe the most understandable part, by the way. But there was this Turkey becoming closer to Russia. And with the current government, due to Erdogan's personal problems with President Biden, plus Turkey and Erdogan's really high antipathy in Capitol Hill, US Congress, now US is implementing cuts of sanctions. US Congress tries to prevent F-16 sales, F-16 fighter jets sales to Turkey, etc. So it might be really difficult for, in terms of electoral outcomes, if the current president and the government wins. Turkey's closer ties with Russia could be even further. So Turkey, of course, it won't be like Turkey will change its path completely, but it's already a dialogue member for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and now Turkey's biggest trade partner is by far has become recently bypassing Germany, Russia. So this might be increasing because the current government might not have other option, refused by Brussels in terms of full membership, and kind of rejected by the Washington as well. The only policy option maybe for Ankara, the current government, I mean, could be to strengthen ties with Russia, China, and try to become a regional power by leaning on its military capabilities, by of course leaning on national defense industry. On the other hand, the opposition could mean a reset, a refreshment period, a blank page. That's why many people, although they don't like or support the opposition because of their old style rhetoric and maybe some nationalist tendencies, people have more optimism because they might mean a new start. That's the most important thing. So closed doors at Washington could be reopened for the new president. That's the optimistic scenario. Or the stopped process, EU membership process, will be somehow revitalized. I don't expect Turkey becoming a full EU member in any time soon, but at least there might be dialogue. Now the current government is against any negotiation in Cyprus, for instance. Maybe the new government, of course, they won't give up northern Cyprus, but they might be more in support of negotiation in Cyprus, plus accession talks to the EU. There are important European countries, France, for instance, they were strongly critical of the Erdogan regime. They might be more in support of the new government. That's why, I mean, the electoral outcome, the opposition win would mean better options for Turkey's ties with the Western world, but on the other hand, it could bring new risks related to relations with Russia and China. In terms of Russia, some opposition members were very critical of the Akkuyu nuclear plant, for instance, or they were more critical in terms of Russia's policy towards Ukraine. But Turkey's half of natural gas is imported from Russia. We have developing ties with Azerbaijan, but it could not be a full alternative for Russian gas. Plus Turkey, in terms of oil also, last year, Russia became the first country for Turkey. So with this enormous energy dependency on Russia, spoiling relations could be detrimental for Turkish interest. Plus, Chinese investments in Turkey are on the rise in recent years. But some opposition figures, Meral Akşener, Mansur Yavaş, for instance, more nationalist figures, they are sensitive about Uyghurs issue. I think it's very understandable because they make politics on the basis of Turkic identity, and Uyghurs are of Turkic nation living in China. But this might create problems with China as well, which might overshadow Turkey's economic development, since China is an important investor for Turkey as well. Plus, we have the Kurdish issue. The opposition, for instance, proposes Kurdish issue or the East Med issue or the Syrian immigrants deal with European Union. Same for the updating of the customs union. They offer more negotiation and parliamentary methods. In terms of Syrian immigrants deal and updating of the customs union, I think that's a good policy. But solving the Kurdish problem, because now the opposition has the support of the pro-Kurdish bloc and party as well, which is their biggest chance to win the presidency, by the way. But on the other hand, when I look at the Kurdish political demands and Turkish political sensitivities, I don't see anytime soon a real solution. There might be some, of course, cultural rights provided by the opposition, such as the freedom to for education of Kurdish language in some schools up to some degree, etc. But it won't be, of course, leading to political autonomy of Kurds or a federal system. Or it will be more like subsidiarity principle, autonomy of the European municipalities. So they will try to make some reforms within the unitary state structure, which might not be enough in the medium run for Kurdish groups. So that's basically what I wanted to tell. But of course, I can explain in detail with questions and further comments. Thank you.
Absolutely, we have a lot of time to go in details. Thank you very much for a really rich in context introduction. Matúš, where would you follow up in the terms that now we clearly see that there are two competing and rather divergent visions for Turkey, yes, political future. At the same time, internationally speaking, we are in really highly uncertain times with the ongoing war in Ukraine, unstable Middle East, open question of Sweden admission to NATO, relations with United States, etc., etc. What's your take on all of this?
So I think we got pretty detailed presentation from Ozan about the way how these elections will affect the situation not only in Turkey but also in the region. But I will try to sum up the main points from my point of view. I think we can even say that these upcoming elections in Turkey are probably the most important elections in the world this year. I mean, that's for two reasons. One of them is, of course, the fact that it might possibly change completely the way how Turkey is structured internally. And secondly, it will define Turkey's role in the NATO, its relationship with the United States, with the EU, possibly also with Russia. It might change the way how Turkey and the EU approach the migration question, and it might slightly alter the role Ankara is currently playing in the war in Ukraine and how it approaches the tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean. Those are just some of the areas that might be affected. There are many more that we could cover later. Again, just very briefly to the impact on the domestic situation in Turkey. As Ozan suggested, there is a battle between two main blocs, and we might even say that both sides approach the election as some kind of a battle for survival. What I mean by that is the fact that while the opposition is afraid of strengthened repressions from the government after the elections in case it loses the election, the Erdogan side is afraid that it might face criminal charges raised in case the opposition wins the elections. Again, those two blocs are offering completely opposing visions for Turkey as such. I mean, while Erdogan is promoting this kind of authoritarian presidential system, it has poor track in terms of the rule of law, democracy, human rights, etc. It also, let's say, promotes this kind of Islamic conservative vision for the country, while the opposition is somehow united around the idea of coming back to the parliamentary system that was present in Turkey for 2017-2018, and somehow wants to restore the democracy, again, the rule of law, uphold the human rights, etc., etc. So we can see that those visions are completely different and offers completely different solutions for the problems that Turkey is facing nowadays. As for the impact in the foreign policy of Turkey and the impact on the wider region, whether Middle East and Europe, if Erdogan wins the elections, we can say that Turkey's foreign policy will be almost the same as it is nowadays. That means that Turkey will continue to be mostly problematic and challenging partner for the West as such. Although we might expect that even Erdogan will be pushed hard to somehow tone down this kind of challenging rhetoric that we can hear from him, and this is due to the economic problems that Turkey is facing nowadays. Turkey will, or even Turkey under Erdogan will push hard to, attract foreign investors, even from the West. So this will affect the way how Turkey will be approaching the Western partners. However, tensions will continue. This will be caused also by the continuing decay of democratic freedoms and, human rights situation in Turkey. If we look at the partners that Erdogan got before these elections, we might see two small radical Islamist parties that are, promoting changes in the law, protecting women against abuse. So we can definitely say that there is a potential that the democratic and human rights protection in Turkey will decrease even more. This will, of course, cause problems in relations with the EU, with the United States. If the opposition wins, that's a bit more hard to predict, but according to some of the statements made by the leaders of the opposition, we might definitely say that there is a huge promise from the opposition that Turkey, under their leadership, will really try hard to improve the relations with the West. Secondly, from a broad perspective, they're also promising that, unlike Erdogan, they will somehow focus mostly on solving problems in the international arena through the use of diplomatic tools and try to find this, let's say, peace solutions. They definitely do not want to focus on hard power as much as the current government is. If I should go more into detail, as for the EU, we might say that this promise of improving the democracy levels and human rights protections in Turkey, possibly followed by the release of Osman Kavala and Selahattin Demirtas, a former leader of the pro-Kurdish HDP party, will be a strong impetus to improve the relations between the EU and Turkey. And I think Kılıçdaroğlu even said that Turkey will be willing to perform all the necessary reforms demanded by Brussels. So we can see that there will be a potential to improve the relations. On the other hand, I have to strengthen that the EU should somehow reflect this positive attitude, and it is necessary that the EU will be willing to somehow provide also a signs of goodwill. I think Turkey will be definitely interested in discussing visa liberalization, and the modernization of the customs union, possibly also a renegotiation of the migration deal. As for the NATO, and this is, I think, one of the most interesting things, in case the opposition wins, we might expect that Turkey will allow Sweden to join NATO very quickly. And I believe that the opposition will be willing to solve the S-400 problem. I would say that the easiest solution in this case would be that they will somehow agree to put S-400 systems into warehouses with a promise that they will not activate the system, which might result into somehow reintegration of Turkey back into the F-35 program. I think that might be a solution acceptable for both sides, and it can completely change the relationship between the NATO and the Turkey that we can see nowadays. Then we have other issues, because sometimes the problem is that, especially from the Western perspective, there is this kind of naive expectation that if the opposition wins the election, everything will be fine. All the problems that we can see within Turkey and the West nowadays will just disappear. This is not true, and even the opposition is saying that, despite the fact that we are, promising, or we will try to improve the relations with the West, we will also protect the national interests of Turkey. So this means that, especially the issues like the Eastern Mediterranean tensions, possibly the Cyprus issue, those are the topics that will not be solved very quickly, but we might again expect some kind of positive attitude from Turkey in case the opposition wins, even in those cases. Then another huge problem that I do not believe that even the opposition will be able to solve is the question of the Western support for the Kurdish groups in Syria. I mean, this is the case of, this is the issue that is threatening the national security of Turkey, and it doesn't matter whether it's the opposition or Erdogan that is governing the country. I mean, Turkey will always see that as a direct threat for its national sovereignty. This is something that will take a long time to solve, and I do not believe that there will be some, instant positive developments in that matter, even if the opposition wins. For some other issue, I think the opposition will be willing to pull out of militarily, of many countries that the Turkish army is present nowadays. This includes Libya, Somalia, possibly Qatar, but the opposition will continue to focus on Syria and Iraq and the Eastern Mediterranean as a crucial security issues for Turkey. One of the big promises that the opposition leaders made was that the opposition will start the dialogue with the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. This is again the task that is easily to promise or say, but the solution of this, the situation that Turkey is nowadays in relation to Syria, it's going to take a long time, I would say. I mean, the opposition is saying that after establishing dialogue with Damascus, they will somehow agree on the return of the Syrian refugees that are currently living in Turkey back to Syria. I personally think that most of the Syrians that are currently in Turkey will not be willing to return back to Syria. And I even think that even Bashar al-Assad will not be willing to accept like 3 million people that have negative opinion of his government just to come back to Syria. That's a huge amount of people that might, undermine the regime. So this will be again a tough issue to solve, but definitely, the opposition is committed to solve this issue together with Bashar al-Assad. I think I covered most of the the important areas in the foreign policy. What I might add is just one thing, and that the opposition will be facing many obstacles even after it wins the elections. One of them being, and probably the most important being, the heterogeneity of the coalition. I mean, currently there are almost far-right parties in the coalition. There is, let's say, Social Democrats, and there is also some kind of support with from the pro-Kurdish HDP, which means that not the only topic, but if we simplify the issue, they have completely divergent views of many political, social issues, etc. Now they are united again around the idea of defeating Erdogan and somehow re-establishment of the parliamentary system in Turkey. Besides that, when they will try to solve many problems that Turkey is facing nowadays, I think it's pretty easy to expect that there will be disagreements even between them. So this will further create problems for the government in the future. Secondly, another obstacle will be the fact that after more than 20 years in power, AK Party, or let's say Turkish bureaucracy, Turkish security forces, by that I mean police, gendarme, and the Turkish army even, is full of Erdogan's loyalists. To reform the country in the scope that the opposition is planning to will be pretty difficult with this kind of, let's say, obstacle against of you. So thank you. That's everything from my side.
Thank you, Matúš. Again, very, very insightful. For me, who is not expert on Turkish domestic or foreign policy, really super interesting. Gentlemen, I have a question for both of you, as we have only 2 weeks till election. I believe we already saw a lot of in campaign of both blocks or both sides. I believe Turkey is similar in the sense that to different countries that the foreign policy issues are not that much really moving the public discourse before election, and this is of course mostly about domestic issues. Yet I would like to ask if you witnessed, you observed any incursions of foreign policy issues into the election debates, into the campaign of both camps, and which maybe were the most prevalent, even if in the whole picture they were still a minority of the issues discussed.
Okay, I start, if it's okay, Matúš. By the way, I written a detailed report on this. Matúš edited it, so you'll be able to, our readers will be able to read it in detail, all these points. Other than this, of course, in terms of foreign policy, you are right, Mate. Generally, in Turkey, domestic politics matter and dominate the political scene. However, Turkish people, there are these perception of Turkish foreign policy perception studies made by Kadir University in Istanbul, for instance. There are some strong sensitivities which might affect their voting behavior as well, although they are being political foreign policy matters. For instance, when there is too much Israeli aggression in Palestine and some video footages showing Israeli soldiers entering into Muslim worship places, or killing Muslim women, etc., that creates reaction. In the old years, Erdogan used these pretexts very skillfully. So there was this Davos meeting where Erdogan said 1 minute, or this Mavi Marmara incident in 2010, I think, which completely deteriorated Turkey's relations with Israel. But on the other hand, in domestic politics, created a huge advantage for Erdogan against his opponents, because Erdogan then was able to see, these opponents, you see they defend the brutal behaviors of the Israeli army, etc. So, and it worked very well. Same for U.S. sanctions. Similar to 1970s, during which both left and right was using it, Ecevit and Demirel, skillfully. Anti-Americanism could be a real important domestic political factor in Turkey. I remember early 2000, anti-Americanism was all-time high because there was this American invasion of Iraq, plus there were these SAC incident or the Hood incident where Turkish soldiers kept prisoners by the US Army, etc. This created huge anti-Americanism in Turkey. I was a university student. There was enormous reaction, both on the left and right, Islamists and secularists together, against the United States. Now it's not the same. United States doesn't, in terms of militarily, doesn't do any offense. On the contrary, it's Russia who enters into the soil of Ukraine. But there are still, for instance, most recently, Minister of Interior Affairs Süleyman Soylu made this statement: the election might be the Western effort to, topple down the government. So our people should be very prudent against this will, etc. So foreign policy matters could be important. Now the government focuses on more Islamist and nationalist forces. In Cyprus, they are against negotiations. They want to open Varosha region into tourism once again. Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus is a de facto state only recognized by Turkey. Its president Ersin Tatar is an Erdogan loyalist, so they have very good relations with the current administration of TRNC and Turkey, plus Azerbaijan. For instance, Azerbaijan has become recently, in the last 10 years, an important domestic political actor in Turkey as well. One of the presidential candidates, Sinan Oğan, for instance, has close ties with Azerbaijan political elite. Aliyev is a very strong figure. Mr. Aliyev, President Aliyev, is a strong figure in Turkey's domestic politics as well. And I think they have a closer stance to President Erdogan, although they don't openly show their positioning. So these kinds of Turkic world, Islamist world, positioning, these foreign policy efforts could be influential. Plus, in domestic politics also, Erdogan promised and made a lot of reforms. Now he recently, for instance, promised to give for 1 year free or natural gas to Turkish citizens. I don't know how they will be able to do it, but he had such a promise. Of course, there is propaganda aspect as well. For instance, Erdogan blamed the opposition for trying to close down the Turkish Directorate of Religious Affairs or the Presidency of Religious Affairs. The opposition said, no, we don't have such an agenda. It's Atatürk who opened the institution. It will continue to survive. But he uses such tactics as well, Erdogan, in domestic politics. That's why, by the way, we didn't discuss the scenarios, but there might be a fragmented kind of unclear picture after the election. So there might be like, according to all polls, I should admit, the opposition's presidential candidate, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, leads the polls. I mean, by 3-point distance, 4.5, some says 8 to 10. I don't agree. I think it will be a close race. But by the way, same polls suggest that it won't be finishing in the first round. So there will be a second round coming on the May 28th, 2 weeks after. But it's highly likely, if mathematical equations plus these scientifically driven studies are not in bias, Kılıçdaroğlu should win it. The only barrier for Kılıçdaroğlu will be the first round's parliamentary picture. So after the first round elections, if there will be a weaker coalition opposition in the parliament, Erdogan is a very skillful politician whom I've been watching since the last 2 decades. Erdogan could use this issue. They won't be able to get 360 seats in the parliament. There won't be a return to democratic parliamentary system. So I brought this system. I should be the leading one. Vote me one last time. Erdogan might use such rhetoric, and it might work actually, because most of by the way, Sinan Oğan's, the fourth candidate's voters might opt for Erdogan because Kılıçdaroğlu has the HDP pro-Kurdish parties support, because this bloc is Ata İttifakı, it's called. It's more nationalist, anti-immigrant, Turkish nationalist, far-right group. But Kılıçdaroğlu has the advantage of Muharrem İnce, by the way. Muharrem İnce is against Kılıçdaroğlu, but maybe more than two-thirds of his supporters are in fact originated from classical CHP pro-secular party electorate. So they will be highly likely to vote for Kılıçdaroğlu in the second round. So that's why there might be a Kılıçdaroğlu winning the presidency, but a hung parliament. I use the term hung parliament. So it's not just simple majority, because in Turkish parliament, with a simple majority, you can make laws. But to amend the constitution, you need 360 seats, two-thirds. So it might be difficult unless there is support coming from other oppositional parties. HDP will probably support the CHP in terms of amending the constitution, but even HDP support might not be enough. On the other hand, of course, Erdogan could, after this first round, as a skillful politician, tactical mastermind, can develop such tactics. By the way, I was in Europe 2 weeks ago. I was in Poland. In order to wait flights, I've been in Copenhagen and Vienna for airports while attending my flights. And I had to talk with a lot of Turkish immigrants living in European capitals, Vienna, Copenhagen, Warsaw, etc. And for instance, it's already started, by the way. Turks living abroad, they began to vote a few days ago. And most of them, I just talked to maybe 10 people. It's just an observation. But earlier elections also proved that they started to vote in the last few elections, Turks living in Europe. For instance, they will prefer this foreign, Turkish foreigners. They will be voting for Erdogan and pro-government. They are pro-government.
Dr. Örmeci, I'm sorry to jump in, but time is starting to press us, and I would like to take you back to the question, and also here's Matúš's take on it. Matúš, we have just a couple of minutes left. So, how were foreign policy issues reflected during the campaign for these upcoming elections?
To some extent, there definitely are. I mean, one of the, I would say, pretty strong narratives in the campaign of the President Erdogan is the fact that he made Turkey a regional power that is able to confront even the most powerful global players and to get what it wants from them. This is of course mostly, by that I mean mostly the United States, of course, and possibly the EU as such. Secondly, there is also an impact of Russia on the election narratives. I mean, indirectly, Russia agreed to postpone the payments for the gas before the elections. That's one thing. And secondly, President Putin recently joined the inauguration ceremony online, joined the inauguration ceremony of the nuclear power plant Akkuyu. So by that, Erdogan is able to show that, look at me, I'm able to have a personal relationship with one of the most powerful global leaders, and Russia is also willing, to financially help Ankara with providing funding. I think it was like $20 billion through Akkuyu power plant. So even financially, Russia was supporting the current government before the elections, allowing Ankara to somehow keep the economy afloat before the elections. Last but not least, I would say that there is also the direct participation of some other leaders at the pro-government rallies before the elections. And by that I mean, I think Azerbaijani President Aliyev and Libyan Prime Minister Dbeibak recently joined Erdogan in Istanbul and openly stated their support for his re-election. So that's all from my side today.
Thank you very much. Actually, thank you both for really intriguing discussions. I would wrap it up with a hope that we will see fair, transparent, and free elections in 2 weeks. That it will be only decision of voters which will make the results, whatever that may be, for one or other bloc, and hope for a bright future for the Turkey and also broader region, as we clearly show in the discussion that the implications are really wide and broad, and the stakes here are truly very, very important. Dr. Örmeci, Matúš, thank you very much for this discussion. It was a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.